Good evening. Welcome to church. If you would take your hymn books out, turn with me to page 130. Long years ago, when out in sin, I had no hope, no peace within. Down on my knees in agony, I prayed to Jesus and He gladly set me free. I never shall forget the day when all the burdens from my soul rolled away. It made me happy, glad and free. I'll sing and shout, for He's everything to me. Now I can feel by my side my Holy Spirit. He comes to guide when trials come. He comforts me. Through faith in Him, Lord said I have the victory. I never shall forget the day when all the burdens of my soul rolled away. It made me happy, glad and free. I'll sing and shout it, for He's everything to me. Oh, sinner, come to Jesus now at His dear feet. Just humbly bow, confess to Him your every sin. He'll save and cleanse you, give you peace and joy within. I never shall forget the day when all the burdens from my soul rolled away. It made me happy, glad and free. I'll sing and shout it, for He's everything to me. Page 110. Some glad morning we shall see Jesus in the air. He's coming after you and me. Joy is ours to share. What rejoicing there will be when the saints shall rise, headed for that jubilee under in the skies. Oh, what singing! Oh, what shouting on that happy morning when we all shall rise. Oh, what glory! Hallelujah! When we meet our blessed Savior in the skies. Seems that now I
I'll sing that first song on the first CD. The reason it's first, because it's the first one I sung. Let me say this before I get started. I was at the house this morning, and most of you, wherever you was at, it's probably storming. We had some hail start coming down, and the clouds was looking pretty rough, pretty dark. And I turned around on the porch, and I saw a hummingbird, and it flew in there, got it something to eat, went on its way. And I thought, my goodness, everybody's scared to death. The storm's coming their way, and there's something this small flying in the air. And he just worried about getting something sweet, because he's just looking for some sweetness in the day. He just come by, got him a little bite, and went on. And you know what? Though it was getting dark when it should have been light, and though the storm was coming when we'd like to have seen the sun, and though sometimes, bless God, you know, in all of that, he's still flying in the storm. He's still flying in the storm. I'm glad to know him. Go ahead. He leads me beside the still water, and he gives the greenest pastures for my bed. He restores my soul in a world that's grown cold. Sometimes he pours oil on my head. The Lord is my shepherd. I am so glad I am his lamb, 'cause he takes care of me in a world with so much grief. And one day in his house I will ever live with him. He often lets me sit at his table. All the enemy can do is watch me eat. And at times my cup's so full I can't speak a single word, and his goodness and mercy follows me. The Lord is my shepherd. I am so glad I am his lamb, 'cause he takes care of me in a world with so much grief. And one day in his house I will ever live with him. The Lord is my shepherd. I am so glad I am his lamb, 'cause he takes care of me in a world with so much grief. And one day in his house I will ever live with him.
There we go. Well, let's see how y'all are doing. I know it rained, but we're going to talk about that in just a second. But let's see how your day's been. Good evening.
Good evening.
See, that was really good rehearsal. See, I think you're getting ready for tomorrow night. I think that's going to be good tomorrow night. Now, again, tomorrow night we're going to be showing you our single biggest presentation. Yes. It's on dinosaurs. It's our single biggest presentation. You know, you all really need to lighten up. But tonight we're going to talk about how there's absolutely no proof whatsoever for human evolution. You know, evolutionists say that people evolved either from apes, or they might say primates, or something of that nature. Is that correct? Correct. And they say that humans have only been around for, maybe 1 million years or something like that. Of course, last night I showed you there's no such thing as 1 million years ago. But the fact of the matter is, tonight we're going to take a look at the fact there's absolutely no proof for human evolution whatsoever. And it's so easy to debunk the method that evolutionists use that I can literally teach a child to do it. Let me ask you a question. Tonight, our presentation is called, quote, The Road to Man, unquote. Now, where did that title come from? Because for many, many decades, evolutionists have used this term, the road to man, to supposedly describe how apes evolved into people. But tonight, please notice that the word, the road to man, is in quotes, but notice it's followed by 3 question marks, right? So tonight's presentation really is the road to man. Really? Yeah, the road to man. Really? Tell me something, folks. Do these images look familiar to you? They do, don't they? These are absolutely iconic images. They have been around, being used by evolutionists to convince people, deceive people, into believing they evolved from apes, but they've been using the exact same images since 1960. That's how old these things are. But I have a question for you. When you see these images, you see the little ape becoming a bigger ape, becoming a person, and so forth, you have to admit, you have to admit, there does seem to be a certain plausibility. There does seem to be a certain possibility that this would be true. But I want you to remember, simply because something is plausible, simply because something is reasonable, doesn't necessarily make it true. Is that correct? Amen. And I got a question. When they show you these iconic images, please tell me why they don't show you that. Yeah, why don't they show you the fish walking out of the water that supposedly became the apes? Because that's what they do believe. And there's nothing new about the religion of evolution. Greek philosophers, hundreds of years before Christ were born, taught that fish walked out of the water and became people. Well, there's nothing new under the sun. I quote Ecclesiastes. But the fact of the matter is, they've been teaching the exact same thing for over 2,000 years. This is nothing new. But why don't they show you that little image right there when they show you these? Is it because this does look reasonable, possible? But if you see that, you go, wait a minute. Oh, yeah, that's why. They don't want you to see that, because then you start to ask questions. So let's just take a look. When evolutionists attempt to prove to people that they evolved from apes, they use 4 categories of physical evidence. The 4 categories of physical evidence are shown here on the screen. The first category here, shown by the illustration of the skull fragments of Piltdown Man, this is called the proof by hoaxes. The proof by hoaxes. Now, please tell me, what is a hoax? Well, prank, I understand what you mean, of course, but really the word hoaxes means, well, it's a form of deception, yes. It's a form of human fabrication, so it's man-made. It tain't real, right? Well, that's what a hoax is. It's a fake, it's a fraud, it tain't real. The second category of proof, shown by the illustration of this tooth from Nebraska Man, this is called the proof by misrepresentations. Misrepresentations. The third category of proof, shown here by the illustration of the skull of this Australopithecine, well, this is called the proof by the bones of dead apes. And finally, here we have the fourth category of proof with the illustration of the skull of a Neanderthal, and this is the proof category, the proof by the bones of dead people. And so we have hoaxes, misrepresentations, the bones of dead apes, the bones of dead people. But let's take a little look further. Now, I know that tonight I'm going to be talking, using some big words, but you heard me last night. I love taking $5 words and making 2 bits out of it, right? So first of all, this big old word, Australopithecus, what does it really mean? Well, again, I love taking big words and making little words out of them. First of all, the word austral is just the ancient word for southern. Isn't Australia the southern land? The aurora australis are the southern lights. And austral just means southern. And Pithecus is simply the ancient name for ape. And so this big old word, Australopithecus, just simply means dead southern ape. See how simple this stuff is if you just break it down, you know? Now, why were they called dead southern apes? It's really quite simple. When we first found them, they were dead. But the bones were first found in Africa, but discovered by Europeans. Africa is south of Europe, therefore the bones of dead southern apes. You see how simple this stuff really is, don't you? And I want you to be able to impress your friends, neighbors, family, colleagues, schoolmates, when you go to school tomorrow, if you do. I want you to go over and knock on their door tomorrow and say, "Did you know I'm Austral?" Well, you are southern, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
Hello. And we'll discuss Neanderthals later, but in debunking these 4 proof methods that evolutionists use, these 4 categories of supposed physical evidence, I'm going to debunk the second one first because it only takes a couple of minutes and we won't have to deal with it the rest of the night. But let's talk about misrepresentations. What are they all about? Well, the tooth of the Nebraska man was found in 1922 by evolutionary believing anthropologists in our state of Nebraska, claimed to be the tooth of a pre-human, subhuman, living at some time in the distant past in what is today our state of Nebraska. And in 1922, based on finding this one tooth, an illustrator for the Illustrated London News actually drew what Nebraska man looked like. His friend or wife, I've never figured that one out, his horses, his camels, and a club, all from one tooth. Come on, folks, aren't you impressed? I mean, seriously, that's good, ain't it? But of course, the problem is that 5 years later, in 1927, evolutionary anthropologists digging at the exact same location in Nebraska proved that this was not the tooth of an extinct species of pre-human or subhuman. It was, in fact, the tooth of an extinct species of pig. So this is actually the tooth of porcine man. Okay, he was a real porker. Take the one you like and throw the rest away. But what is the truth about misrepresentations? The truth is the tooth was real. This is not a fake, a fraud, it's not a hoax. The tooth was real, but it was misrepresented to begin with and then later corrected. And this is what science is supposed to do, correct the mistakes when they're made. But that's all you have to know about misrepresentations. Let's go back to hoaxes. Let's go back to Piltdown Man for just a moment as an illustration of one of many hoaxes. Now, the bone fragments, mostly skull and jaw fragments of Piltdown Man, were found in 1912 in an area called Piltdown, but it's near Canterbury Cathedral. It's the deep southeast corner of England. And in 1912, these fragments were found, moved to the British Museum of Natural History in London, one of the world's greatest museums of natural history, proclaimed to be proof of human evolution. The fragments of a pre-human, subhuman living at some time in the distant past in deep southeast England. Until 1953. In 1953, it was finally admitted by the evolutionists at the British Museum of Natural History that this was in fact a hoax. You see, let me show you. This is an illustration of the skull and jaw fragments of Piltdown Man as found in 1912. But in 1953, it was finally announced the jaw is not human. The jaw is actually that of about a 500-year-old orangutan that had died in Borneo about 500 years ago. The teeth are not human. They are actually fossil chimpanzee teeth. I will show you the actual photograph, but please notice when you see the teeth, they are absolutely flat. And the reason is they are chimpanzee teeth were filed down with a modern metal file to make them look more human-like. But the fact is that they are actually fossil chimpanzee teeth. The skull fragments, however, really are human. However, at the back of the skull was a blow from a modern steel pick. Today we now know that this is the skull of a human being that had died of bubonic plague during the medieval times. How y'all doing? Let me show you the actual pictures. You see, the jaw again is orangutan, dead for about 500 years. Notice how absolutely flat the molars are because they've been filed down with a modern metal file. Now, I mentioned that these were found in 1912 and they were finally admitted in 1953 to be a hoax. However, I would like you to know, the evolutionists at the British Museum of Natural History knew this was a hoax in 1923, but they waited 30 years to tell the public. Don't you like the honesty of evolutionists? And you're going to find out that evolutionists love 30 years. And I want you to remember two gentlemen. You see, I want you to remember Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, Jesuit priest, and Dr. Davidson Black, PhD. These two men were involved with the discovery of this hoax at Piltdown. But the reason I want you to remember their names is because you're going to see them again. So simply to review, what do we have here? It's a medieval human skull dug out of a medieval graveyard. We have about a 500-year-old orangutan jaw, probably from Borneo, and we have fossil chimpanzee teeth. This is a hoax. But let's continue to look at how evolutionists attempt to prove human evolution. Please understand, this is not a creationist image here that you see. This actually comes from evolutionists, as is obvious because let's take a look at these dates. You already know that I do not agree with these dates, but let's just take a look at them, okay? Now, what I'm illustrating for you here is this is the method by which evolutionists try to prove the evolution of everything. I don't care whether it's roses, dinosaurs, butterflies, or people. This is the method that they use to do this. It's called the proof by ranking. R-A-N-K-I-N-G, ranking. Now, what does it mean to put something in a rank? It means to put it in a logical order or a logical sequence. So to rank, to put in a logical order, to put in a logical sequence. And this is an illustration of how evolutionists do this, the way they teach it in school. Now, here we're dealing with, supposed human evolution tonight. So what do? They take skull. They take the skull of a gibbon, a chimpanzee, an orangutan, a gorilla, and a human. They make the absolute most meticulous measurements you have ever seen in your life. They measure everything that you can measure, and then they measure it again 6 times. Are you with me? They make this look really scientific. But after they have made all these meticulous measurements, what do? They simply line them up by size and shape as is illustrated down here. Now down here you'll see skulls arranged A, B, C through F here. Now the gorilla skull over here is not a part of the sequence. It is simply there for purposes of comparison. Also to help you, to deceive you into believing that what you're looking at is true. But down here we have these skulls ranked, put in a logical order or a logical sequence by size and shape. But in the middle we have what is called a key or a legend, identifying which each of these skulls is supposed to be. So we have A through F, and here we have A through F, correct? Correct. So let's just take a look at what we got. Now skull A here is Australopithecus, or dead southern ape, supposedly 500,000 to 1 million years old. B is Pithecanthropus erectus, supposedly 200 to 500,000 years old. C, Homo sapiens, supposedly 100 to 200,000 years old. D, Neanderthal, supposedly 50 to 100,000 years old. E, Homo sapien variety Neanderthaliensis, supposedly 50,000 years old. And F here is modern Homo sapien. But I would like to pick out one in particular, B, Pithecanthropus erectus. Does anybody remember in school being taught about a creature in the past that existed called Pithecanthropus erectus? Anybody remember this at all? And if you don't, that's fine. I just was wondering. Okay, well, first of all, what does the name Pithecanthropus erectus mean? As Christians, when we study the Bible, we are studying about the life of the Theanthropos. The Theanthropos. Who is the Theanthropos? Well, theos in Greek means God. Theology is the study of God. Anthropos is simply the ancient word for man. Anthropology is the study of man. And erectus means walks upright. I'll add that for a moment. But when we study the Bible, we study about the life of the theanthropos. Who is that? The one who is 100% God and 100% man. He's the theanthropos. That's Jesus Christ. Who is the Pithecanthropus erectus? Well, pitha, again, is just the ancient word for ape. Anthropos is the ancient word for man. And erectus means walks upright. So this big old word simply means the ape man who walks upright. Come on, folks, see how simple this stuff is when you just break it down. Now, again, for some reason, I'm kind of suffering from the heat and the humidity up here. You know, I came from Florida up here to cool off. What happened? I'm telling you. But Pithecanthropus erectus. Now, if you do not remember this name from school, do any of you remember the same creature, but by its common name? Because the common name given to this creature is Java man. Anybody remember being taught about Java man? See, I see a few heads shaking and so forth. The rest of you just blink your eyes. Now, let's talk about Java man, or Pithecanthropus erectus. And what's the story about him? Well, Java man, originally called Pithecanthropus erectus, meaning the ape man who walks upright, is now called Homo erectus, or man who walks upright, but was made from a few teeth and a single skull cap found in 1891 along the banks of the Solo River in Java, Indonesia. The pieces were found by the Dutch anatomist Dr. Eugene Dubois, MD. Now, he was a medical doctor. However, he was a disciple of the German evolutionist Dr. Ernst Haeckel. Now, if you are not familiar with Dr. Haeckel, you want to become familiar with him. He is arguably the third most important evolutionist of the 1800s, behind Charles Darwin, Thomas Huxley, Ernst Haeckel. Now, Ernst Haeckel was born in a theoretically German Christian home. However, he was never really a Christian. He did believe in evolutionists. But he would go on to earn a PhD, and he would eventually teach as a professor at Jena University for decades. But he believed in evolution. However, when Charles Darwin published Origin of the Species in the fall of 1859, it was an immediate success. It sold out the first edition in one day. Why? The book, Origin of the Species by Natural Selection, or Dealing with Favored Races, it was a book on racism. It was a book that condoned why the white people in England should rule the colored people around the world, like in India, Australia, etc. It was really a book to condone their political views, and they snapped it up because the English were looking for a reason not to believe there was a God. And that's why you believe in evolution, is to believe there's no God. And the book was incredibly popular, and it was immediately translated into other languages of the continent. It was translated into French, finally German. And when the book was translated into German, Dr. Haeckel read it. And he went from being an evolutionist, teacher of evolution, to a militant evolutionist. He would go on to actually create great frauds in an attempt to convince people that evolution was true. In my DVD back there on Carbon 14, I include a biography DVD section there on Dr. Haeckel. Believe me, he's an interesting guy. You see, he would go on to make great frauds. One of them was Pithecanthropus alalis. Now, Pithecanthropus, you already know, means ape man, but Pithecanthropus alalis means speechless ape man. Because Charles Darwin, Thomas Huxley, Ernst Haeckel, they believed the only difference between apes and people was we could talk and they couldn't. And so he came up with this creature called Pithecanthropus alalis. Now, it is interesting that Dr. Haeckel was actually a very good artist, which is unusual with a scientist, but nonetheless, he was a very good artist. His paintings still sell for large amounts today, but mostly because of his historical nature. But instead of doing it himself, he hired an artist to draw what this creature looked like. And he drew this man, this woman, and a baby, Pithecanthropus alalis. Now, it's kind of interesting. I'll just kind of describe what it looked like to you. You see, there's a man standing up, but he has his back somewhat to the audience. His arms are up like this. His face is turned towards the audience. But remember, Dr. Haeckel is German, correct? Now, I know none of you are going to believe this, but it's absolutely true. In the 1800s, scientists teaching at universities would actually rent halls, put out billboards, and charge tickets for people to come hear them speak. Maybe I need to repeat that. There was actually a time when people would pay for tickets to go to a theater and hear a scientist lecture. Can you believe it?
It's hard to believe.
I know, it's hard to believe, isn't it? But it's true. But he would go around Germany renting halls and putting up posters and selling tickets to blue-collar German workers. And he used this illustration to convince them of evolution. And so the man is standing up with his back slightly to the audience, his arms raised up. He's got enough hair for 3 gorillas. But it's interesting to me because on the face, as he's looking back, this guy has a German handlebar mustache. He knew how to appeal to his audience. Are you getting the idea here? Now, the woman is sitting with a very long, sort of horse-like face. She's holding the baby. You can't really see anything about the baby. But he went around Germany lecturing and saying, this is the creature from which all Germans had evolved. To this day, there has never been one piece of physical evidence found to support the existence of such a creature. He just made it up. He also went on to do other great frauds. He invented a creature called the Monera, or Moneron. Now, mono means one. And so he invented a single-celled creature because, you see, he realized that if evolution was true, we had to come from lesser creatures. And the thing was, they hadn't found the single-celled creature that everybody had evolved from, so he made it up. And again, he is a very good artist. He actually did the drawings of several different species of these single-celled creatures. In one of these illustrations, he even shows the life cycle of it reproducing around the. It's very interesting. The fact of the matter is, of course, again, we have never to this day found alive or in the fossil record any such creature as he drew. He just made it up. And then, of course, I'm sure that when you came in here tonight, these very words are on your lips because he's the guy who came up with, some people call it ontogeny begets phylogeny, others embryonic recapitulation. But I'm sure all of you were thinking about this on the way in tonight, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Right? But we can all laugh at this embryonic recapitulation, but you really need to take it pretty seriously because I'm almost sure that most, if not all of you, have seen these illustrations. You see, he's the guy who came up with the illustrations that show all these embryos side by side that look very much alike, and then beneath them, creatures that they're supposed to have, become over their lifetime, and what they finally were. So all these embryos are shown in drawings, and then below those, this one became a salamander, and this one a chicken, and this one a pig, and this one a human baby. Do any of you remember images kind of like that? Yeah, you should, because they're still being used in textbooks today around the world. I can assure you that. I saw them in Russia just a few years ago at an elite high school. And if you haven't seen them, I've got them in my book. I'll show them to you for free if you'd like. But he showed these images of these embryos that look almost identical because they're identical. And, and then he shows them as they were developing in the mother's womb or in the egg or whatever. And then as they were then, in essence, born, hatched, or whatever. This was known to be a fraud by 1915. You see, he had actually stolen the legitimate drawings of legitimate embryologists of the time. And remember, he was a good artist, and he had taken an eraser and he had erased some of the lines. He took a pencil, drew in some lines that were never there. He changed the size by as much as a factor of 10. It's an absolute fraud, and everybody has known it. No legitimate embryologist believes it today, and we knew it was a fraud in 1915. But the fact of the matter is it is still being used in textbooks around the world today, even in the United States. And if you don't think this is serious, these are drawings that are still being used by a group called Planned Parenthood.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to convince young girls that, you're just aborting a jellyfish. Because, you see, his idea was that after conception, you become a jellyfish, and then a fish, and then an amphibian, then a reptile, then a mammal, and you were only born human. That's what he called embryonic recapitulation, that in your mother's womb, you went through the various stages of your prior evolution, and you were only born human. Yeah, I know, it sounds like a joke, but the fact of the matter is it's a very bad joke. But these illustrations are still being used today. That's this guy. And Dr. Dubois, though Dutch, is a disciple of Haeckel. Haeckel is, in essence, a disciple of Charles Darwin. But both men believe that if Dr. Dubois would go to Java, Indonesia, remember in these years, Java, Indonesia was the Dutch East Indies. It was a part of the Dutch Empire. And so he didn't even need a passport to go there. It's a part of the same country. Now, I'd like to challenge your Christian commitment tonight. How committed are you? Because how committed was Dr. Dubois? He was an MD, but he volunteered to be a doctor in the Dutch army to get a free ticket to Indonesia. That's commitment, folks. Well, let's continue to talk about what happened. Now, the two of them believed that if Dr. Dubois went to Java, he would find the missing link between apes and people, correct? Now, he arrived in December of 1887, but 4 years later announced the finding of these fragments. And I thought that you might like to know a little more about this. For instance, I thought you'd be really impressed by his archaeological team. You see, his archaeological team consisted of 2 Dutch engineers, prison convict laborers, and 2 Dutch army corporals to watch the prisoners. Come on, aren't you impressed by the quality of this scientific research team? Hello? Now, of course, he wanted to tell Dr. Haeckel back in Germany, Eureka, I have found it, the missing link. But of course, he's in Indonesia. This is 1891, and I realize that some of the young people here, I know you're never going to believe this. There were no cell phones in 1891. Whoa. He had to send a telegram. Anybody remember telegrams? Yeah. I do, but barely. But he has to send a telegram, but it's halfway around the world, and they charge you per letter. And so it's rather expensive. So he sends a short cryptic telegram to Dr. Haeckel in Germany, Eureka, I have found it. And Dr. Haeckel wants to congratulate his disciple on the discovery. He sends back again a short, again, very expensive telegram to Indonesia. I thought you'd like to know what his telegram said, because in response, he sent back to, quote, from the inventor of Pithecanthropus to his happy discoverer. Perhaps I need to read that again. From the inventor of Pithecanthropus to his happy discoverer. Dr. Haeckel had already made up the name. He simply sent Dubois there to find the parts to go with it. Is that right? But Dr. Dubois forgot to tell people a few things about his discovery, and I bet you have already figured this out. How long was it before he admitted the truth? 30 years. Excellent. See, you were paying attention. In 1921, he admitted that what I'm about to share with you is absolutely true. You see, he had found one single large ape-like skull cap. Today, it's considered to be a giant gibbon. He found 3 teeth, but only one was human. The other 2 were from an orangutan. He did find a human thigh bone, but that was 1 year after his announcement in 1892, and the thigh bone was 50 feet away from the other discoveries as illustrated by his drawing. And he also forgot to tell anybody that 1 year earlier, in 1890, he had found 2 totally normal human skulls at the exact same location. He was so concerned about these skulls being found and known about, since obviously they disproved what he was teaching, he hid them under his bed. Hello? So today we now know that this is a hoax. Is that correct? Correct. And I do want to make mention about the term Homo erectus for just a moment. What you're going to find out is that the term Homo erectus today is the file 13. It's the circular filing cabinet. It is the garbage can of evolutionary anthropologists, that every time they find something, any bone whatsoever, that they think has anything to do with human evolution, but they cannot prove it, they cannot determine exactly what creature it came from, they throw it into this garbage bin called Homo erectus. For instance, we have found an absolutely, positively human foot bone, a metatarsal bone, the top bone in your foot, in a layer where Lucy bones were found. Now, according to evolutionists, Lucy was the first ape to walk upright, living 3 to 4 million years ago, but we found a totally normal human foot bone there, in the same layer. But of course, what was their rationale for finding it? They said, oh, well, there must be some ape that has a foot exactly like humans, living 3 to 4 million years ago, but it was still an ape, according to them, right? Come on, folks, any excuse in a storm.
That's right.
Well, let's keep looking at all this. So going back to our chart, let's think. A. Well, A is Australopithecus, supposedly 500,000 to 1 million years old, so dead southern ape, right? But B here, Pithecanthropus erectus, now wait a minute, that's a hoax. That's something that never existed, is that correct?
Correct.
And C is Homo sapien. Now, the last time I looked, that's us. And, well, D here is Neanderthal, but since the Neanderthals were first found in the 1850s, they have always been classified as Homo sapien, which is just us. And, of course, E here was Homo sapien variety neanderthalensis, which is like saying Homo sapien Chinese, Homo sapien Brazilian. I mean, that's what it's kind of like. But that, again, would just be us, correct? And then, of course, F is modern Homo sapien, which is most assuredly us. Therefore, let's see, what do we have? Well, we have 1 dead southern ape, something that never existed, and 4 people. How are we doing? Doing good? Now, I do want to mention, because I realize some of you might have had dinner before you came tonight, remember that I will be showing you a few pictures of some human skulls. I just want to prepare you for that, just so you won't have any problem here, okay? Okay? Okay. Good. Now, here is the photograph of a creature identified as Sinanthropus pekinensis, which means Chinaman from Peking, but more usually simply called Peking man. Now, I find this skull scary. I don't know about you, but I do. Well, you see, I don't find the skull scary at all. What I find out to be scary is the source. Please look carefully. This comes from a series. Now, I'm not going to show you the whole series. I'm only going to show you 2 in the series, but there's a whole series of these. But notice that this comes from Los Angeles, California Unified School District. These 2 pictures I'm going to show you here are used in a series of slides to teach elementary school children they evolved from apes. That is what I find scary. Now, does anybody have a problem with me showing you the picture of the skull of Peking man? You do not. You don't? You should. As a matter of fact, you should. You should actually get up and stone me, because that is not the photograph of the skull of Peking man. That is the picture of the model of the skull of Peking man. Let me just explain to you for a moment. You see, Peking man, the discovery occurred obviously in China, named for Beijing at the time, Peking then. But in 1923, evolutionary believing anthropologists went to the capital then, which was Peking, got permission to go out, start digging. The work began in 1923. The work was stopped in 1937 when the Japanese invaded Manchuria, and it was obvious they were going to invade China, and the work had to be stopped. But let me explain a little bit to you. Take a good look at this photograph. Now, take a look at that photograph. These are not the actual original pieces. This is a museum model of the pieces as they were supposedly found. Please tell me, does this look like that? Excuse me? No. This is simply a model that they used and then took the photograph, but this represents the pieces that they were actually found. I think there's a little difference, don't you? And again, the work started in 1923, ended in 1937. However, in 1926, Dr. Davidson Black came along. Remember him with Piltdown? And he's the man who actually gave it the name Peking man, or Sinanthropus pekinensis. But when the Japanese invaded China, the fellow evolutionists around the world said, oh, you cannot allow these precious bones to fall into the hands of the advancing Japanese army. You must allow them to be sent out of China for safekeeping during World War II. And finally, in 1941, some pictures were taken. The pieces were carefully packaged and cast, shipped out of China, and promptly lost. The original pictures, all we have, the bones themselves have never been seen since 1941. They were simply disappeared. But I want to remind you that in 1926, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, Jesuit priest, and Dr. Davidson Black, PhD, visited this site. They were involved with the Piltdown hoax, is that correct? But they were also involved with the Peking hoax. It's commonly accepted today they salted both locations. Again, here we have a hoax, something that's not real. Well, let's continue. Here's another photograph in the series. This is the second and last one I will show you, but this has a French name because this is a Neanderthal skull found in France. Now, Neanderthals, these are the ones that most people think of as cavemen. And I would add, cave women. Come on, no cave women, no cavemen, right? Hello. But these are the ones that most people associate with that terminology. But let's talk a little bit about Neanderthals. First of all, what does the name Neanderthal actually mean? Well, in German, Tal means valley. Neanderthal means the valley that belonged to a gentleman whose last name was Neander. I thought you might find it kind of interesting, particularly for those involved with the music that we have here tonight. His actual name was Joachim Neander, and he was a writer of Christian hymns. But the first Neanderthal bones were found in caves in his valley. But let's take a little look at Neanderthals, because again, evolutionists want you to believe that these are primitive, subhuman, pre-human beings, gorilla-like in many cases, but it's simply not true. Now, we have found today slightly over 400 different individuals, not complete, but bits and pieces of over 400 individuals, since they were first found in 1856. Now, I looked again today trying to find a more current map, but this is the most current map I can find, but I want to show you where we have found Neanderthal remains. Now, this map, again, is the newest I can get, but Neanderthals were first found in Germany, more in France, some in Portugal and Spain, northern Italy, in the Adriatic. Neanderthal remains have been found in northern Israel at the foot of Mount Hermon near Tel Dan, and out past the Black Sea to the east, more recently to the east of the Caspian Sea, more recently into central Siberia. Now, I realize it's very difficult on this map, I'm sorry, but if any of you can see this, and I hope at least a few of you can any of you see a little bit of a white outline image right over here that looks like a banana standing on end? I think you few closer ones can. That is Lake Baikal. Lake Baikal. It is the largest freshwater lake in the world. It has more freshwater than all the rest of the lakes in the world combined. And it is beautiful. I have preached on the banks of the Baikal, and a year ago, February, I was walking on the lake. It's easy to do when it's frozen. There was 10 inches of ice, but I was walking on Lake Baikal a year ago, February, and it's a beautiful place. But the reason I mention that is I want to update this map. To the east of the Baikal, over here, is the city of Chita. Chita. Now, I have taught in Chita twice. That is where the most recent Neanderthal remains have been found. And so now we know that the Neanderthals went all the way from the Atlantic, all the way almost to the Pacific. And I think it's a little hard to believe that they're pre-human or subhuman. How about you? You see, first of all, they had a brain 13% larger than ours on average. I think that makes them a little difficult to call them pre-human or subhuman. Would you agree if they had a bigger brain than we do, you know? Secondly, genetic studies have been done. We have actually extracted DNA from teeth and finger bones of Neanderthals, and we now know that they are 99.7 to 100% genetically identical to us, but I would point out to you that in the human population, we vary by more than that. Humans vary by more than 4.5% in genetic information. We do not all have the same amount. It actually does vary. And so the Neanderthals vary less from them and us than we vary from each other. Are you with me? And again, I would point out to you, many people ask me, are cavemen, cavewomen biblical? Well, first of all, let's talk about Neanderthals because they are mentioned in the Bible. Would you please turn to Genesis chapter 10, verse 3. Genesis chapter 10 and verse 3. As you read Genesis 10:3, you'll find the name Ashkenazi. Ashkenazi. Now, that is the name of ancient Germany. For example, there are two branches of European Judaism. Southern Jews, which come from Spain, are called the Sephardic Jews. But the Jews from Northern Europe are called the Ashkenazi Jews. And even today, when Jews make Aliyah, the return to the land of Israel from Northern Europe, they're called the Ashkenazi. And so in Genesis 10:3, in the Table of Nations, they started at the Tower of Babel, and they migrated to what is now northern Germany. They established themselves in caves, lived there for probably no more than about 200 years, learning how to live in a new environment. And then they left the caves to go out and establish European civilization. Again, I think it's a little hard to believe that they're primitive, pre-human, don't you? Yes. Because they had language, they had art, they had music, they made jewelry, they were religious, they buried their dead with religious artifacts in graves, carefully arranged. They hunted. They gathered. People have always said that they were hunter-gatherers, of course. However, in 2015, we proved that they also farmed. And 1 year ago, we've proved that they built houses outside of caves. They did everything that a human does because they're human. Hello? Yes. Now, again, let's address the question, are cavemen and cavewomen biblical? I always want to include everybody here, you know. Please answer this one question for me tonight. Please tell me, if God starts the Bible on day 1, week 1, month 1, year 1, is there any such thing as prehistoric? No. Come on, folks, I don't ask trick questions. No. If God starts the Bible on day 1, week 1, month 1, year 1, is there any such thing as prehistoric? No, there is no such thing as prehistoric. Technically, the word prehistoric was invented by evolutionists, but it's actually a non-word because it has no actual meaning. There is no such thing as prehistoric. Everything is historic.
That's good.
And when people ask me, are cavemen and cavewomen biblical? Well, of course they are. Just read your Bible for a moment. You will find 31 references in the Bible to people living in caves. And just to give you some examples, well, Lot and his daughters in Genesis 19. Or how about the 5 Amorite kings in Joshua 10? What about the children of Israel in Judges 6? How about Samson? It's recorded he lived in a cave in Judges 15:8. Now, Samson was a judge of Israel equivalent to the kings that would come later. But doesn't that qualify Samson as a caveman? Or what about the great prophet Elijah? You know, we even think we know the cave that Elijah lived in, although I openly admit there was no brass plaque there when we found it. But we even think we know the cave that he lived in, so doesn't that qualify the great prophet Elijah as a caveman? Is that correct? And what about Obadiah's 100 prophets in 1 Kings 18? What about the men of Israel in the cave at Michmash in 1 Samuel 13? And do I not seem to remember? King David lived in the cave of Adullam, recorded in 1 Samuel 22 and 24. Is that correct? So doesn't that qualify King David as a caveman? And how about the New Testament? You know, when the Apostle Paul, who was a persecutor of the church as Saul, meets the Lord on the road to Damascus, what happens? Well, his sight is removed from him, but he will go on to Damascus. He will receive his sight. He will return to Jerusalem briefly. But please tell me, after that, what did Paul do? Well, the Bible says he went out into the deserts of Arabia for 3 years and was taught only of the Holy Spirit for 3 years. Please tell me, in the Arabian desert, where do you think he lived? In a cave. Remember that there are thousands of caves in the wilderness of Israel. In the north, next to the Sea of Galilee, there are hundreds of caves on Mount Arbel. Throughout the whole desert region of the Middle East, there are thousands and thousands of caves. People have lived there for many, many years. And they would go there to flee violence, war, pestilence, etc. But I don't know about you. I find it very interesting. When you read Paul's writings about the communion instituted by Jesus with his disciples, Paul says that the Lord revealed it to him, of course. But don't you find it interesting? He writes about how the Lord instituted communion in the first person, as if he were there. But of course, we know that Paul was not there. He was a persecutor of the church at the time, correct? But he speaks about it as if he were there. And so I have this vision I'd like to just share with you. You can accept it or not. But what I think happened was that Paul goes out, he finds a nice, comfortable cave in the Arabian desert. And then the Holy Spirit brought in a 55-inch flat-screen TV and played DVDs of the life of Jesus for 3 years. You know, isn't that kind of how it sounds? I mean, really, you know. Well, let's continue. What does the proof by ranking really prove? This is where I can even take a child and show them how to defeat an evolutionist in a debate. Now, remember, the proof by ranking, it is the second worst method of proof in science, but it is the most favorite method of proof used by evolutionists. Again, it doesn't matter what they're talking about. I don't care whether they're talking about frogs, cows, elephants, people. It's their favorite method of proof, but it is the second worst method of proof in science. So how does the proof by ranking work, and how do you debunk it? Well, it's really quite simple. Now, I am not asking you to stand up. I'm saying if I were to ask you to stand up, okay? Now, if I were to ask all of you in this room to stand up and come down here, and I were to put you in a rank, a logical order, logical sequence across the front here by your height only. So I'll start with the shortest ones over there, and certainly probably those two. But I'd start with the shortest ones over there, and then higher and higher, and then the taller guys over here with me, right? Now, once I have arranged everybody in this room by your height, from the shortest to the tallest, please tell me what two things have I proven scientifically. Again, I don't ask trick questions. I did prove two things scientifically. What two things did I prove? Thank you, sir. Now, I agree. You're absolutely, don't misunderstand me. You're absolutely correct. I'm just going to put it in slightly more scientific language, okay? I just proved that people come in different heights. But it's what you said, right? What is the second thing I just proved scientifically? Nobody's got it? You got just that close. I just proved that I have the intelligence to do it. Exactly correct. So I just proved that people come in different heights, and I have the intelligence to do this. Is that right? That's right. Now, let's do it again, a second time, but let's change the rule. This time, if I were to ask everybody to stand up, come down here with me, but this time, instead of arranging you by your height, this time, I'm going to arrange you by the month and the day you were born. I don't care how old you are. I don't care what year you were born. I don't care whether you're male or female. I don't care how tall you are, how short you are. I'm simply going to arrange you by the month and the day of the month that you were born. So I'll start with January over here through December over here. Go back within each month, put you 1 through 31 for the day of the month, correct? Now, with a room with this many people in it, I will have proven, simply as a consequence of this, that at least 2 of you in this room share the same birthday. That's just the way it works. However, what 2 things did I scientifically prove? Come on, this is sort of a gimme, except for those I've already put to sleep. What did I just prove scientifically? Well, somebody said, yes, I have the intelligence to do it, and? Well, yeah, people are born on different days of the year. Is that right? So I just proved people are born on different days of the year, and I have the intelligence to do it. But please tell me, in either case, arranging you by your height or arranging you by the month and day of your birth, please tell me, did I prove anything about your heritage?
No.
Did I prove that any 2 of you are married to each other?
No.
Did I prove that any of you are father and son?
No.
Mother and daughter?
No.
Aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, or cousins? No. Lining things up by size and shape proves absolutely nothing about your heritage. And think with me for just a moment. After all, we're in Tennessee. We're up here on this location where I won't ask you to raise your hand, but I think there has to be at least one hunter in here. And tell me something. If I were to walk out in the woods around here and I found the skeleton of a dead deer, which of course died from old age. But if there were enough bones left, I might be able to tell whether it was a male or a female. And if there's certain parts that are there, I might be able to tell how old it was at death, at least within a year of being correct. But please tell me, when I find the skeleton, whatever's left, could I prove it ever had children? No. Oh. You see, I want to make sure these people never deceive you again, because this is called stage magic. It's not black magic, it's stage magic. It's illusion. It's used to deceive you. It's just stage magic. Think with me for a moment. If I put a unicycle next to a bicycle, next to a motorcycle, next to an automobile, next to a pickup, did I just prove that pickups evolved from unicycles? No. Excuse me? Not even theirs. But follow me for just a moment. Think with me for just a minute. I want to make sure they never deceive you again. How many of you in here have seen some of the new modern special effects movies, mutants and so forth? But in these movies, you've seen a person become an animal become a person, one person become a different person. And today, it is the computer graphics are so good. It even looks real on the screen. Now, you know it's fake, you know it's fiction, but I mean, it's so good today. This is no longer 1938 claymation, right?
That's right.
I mean, today it really looks good on the screen, right? And you can buy into it for the purpose of the story, but you know it's fiction, right? Now, I have a proposition for you. Do we understand? I don't gamble, I don't condone gambling, but I got a proposition for you. There's a difference, right? There's a difference. Here's my proposition. You give me one skull each of 100, or let's make it even bigger, 1,000 real animals. So you give me the skull of a rat, a dog, a cat, a cow, a horse, okay? Just one skull each of 1,000 real different animals. And using this method, I will pick and choose bones and line them up in a proof by ranking and prove to you beyond a shadow of a doubt that apes did not evolve into people. What really happened was apes evolved into whales. Or I'll pick and choose the skulls, line them up in a proof by ranking, and prove to you that apes did not evolve into people. What really happened was apes evolved into elephants. Hello?
Yeah, I see.
You see, you let me pick and choose the bones, and I'll line them up in a sequence that will actually make it look like that's what happened. But of course it didn't. Again, I want to make sure they never deceive you again. Think with me. When they show you skulls, a gibbon, a chimpanzee, an orangutan, a gorilla, and a human, and they say you see how one evolved from the other, the answer would be yes, if I fill in the blanks with my own imagination. Did you hear that?
Yes.
The answer is yes. If you can make a special effects movie in your brain and you can fill in the blanks with your own imagination, you can say yes. But what is the truth? No, I see 5 skulls lined up by size and shape, but that proves nothing that one came from the other.
That's right.
And don't ever allow them to deceive you again. Now, with that in mind, I also have a good question because, Dr. Grady, and that's how you can easily refer to me, but Dr. Grady, I only ask the good questions. Here's the good question. Which proof by ranking are we supposed to believe is the right one? You see, I have an entire series of these proofs by different evolutionists, and they are all different. But just to prove my point, here is one from the Smithsonian. Now, the Smithsonian is an organization completely, totally devoted to evolution. And this is where I used to spend my time when I was an evolutionist. When I went to high school in D.C., I used to do my high school homework at the Library of Congress. Give you any inkling that I'm serious about things? But when I wasn't studying, I used to go down to the Smithsonian. I was immersing myself in all this evolution there. And this comes from their own website. And let's take a look at what we have. This is a proof by ranking. And what we have is on the right is the present. That's today. And then going back in time to the left, going back in 1 million year increments, back 6 million years. Now, the bars you see here, these colored bars, each one of the bars is supposed to represent a specific creature and the time that it lived, according to evolutionists. Now, each bar has the name next to it identifying what it is. And for instance, this one right in the middle here, this is Australopithecus afarensis, nicknamed Lucy. Anybody remember a creature called Lucy? Yeah, supposedly the first ape that walked upright. But that's Lucy, found by Dr. Donald Johanson. And she supposedly lived from 3 to 4 million years ago, although there is a great deal of evidence to suggest today it actually might be a male skeleton and not a female. But that's what he said originally. But you now know everything you need to know to debunk this whole thing. I'm serious, and I don't care where you start up here, but you can debunk this whole thing by yourself. However, since I'm the one that's up front, I'll do it. How's that? That's good. Is that all right with you? Yeah. Did you notice we have the solid bars representing when each of these creatures is supposed to live? You know, people are over here and Lucy's there. But did you notice that the solid bars are connected with dotted lines? Is that correct? Correct. Now, why do we connect things with dotted lines? You see, good answer, by the way. The reason we connect things with dotted lines is to show a representation we think might be correct, but we cannot prove. So it's just an opinion. It's our idea how these things might connect, but we can't prove it, because if we could prove it, we would use solid lines, correct? So you use dotted lines to show a relationship that you think might be right, but you cannot prove. Is that correct? Correct. And so here we see the connection with dotted lines. Also, I was wondering if you happen to notice the question marks. Because please notice, there are 5 question marks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boy, don't those just give you confidence? Come on, folks, 5 question marks. Doesn't it just drive confidence there? I also wondered if you happen to notice these 2 back here. Did you notice that there are no dotted lines connecting these 2 to the rest of this? Is that correct? Also notice these 3 down here. Now there's 2 question marks there and 1 question mark here, but notice that these 3 are connected with dotted lines here, but notice there are no dotted lines going from here to people. Is that correct? Yes. So let's think. There are no dotted lines connecting these 2 to here, and these 3, though connected, don't connect to us. So why are they there? Now, ladies and gentlemen, there is one word to describe why those 5 are there. I want you to repeat this one word after me. Please repeat the word filler.
Filler.
A little louder. Filler. Say it loud, say it proud. Filler. Why are those 5 there? Because they needed filler. Because if you take those 5 away, it looks like there's less evidence for human evolution. And, well, again, Dr. Grady only asked the good question. There are actually 2 different road to man up here. So which one are we supposed to believe? Now, for example, if we start with people going back, we could go back this way, but when we get here, we don't know where it came from. But we could also go from here this way and get to the same place. Is that correct? So there's actually 2 different ones there. So which one are we supposed to believe is correct? You start to see how you can debunk this stuff, right? And then I want you to know that in October of 2013, all 5 of these were reclassified as Homo erectus. Even evolutionary anthropologists agree that all 5 of them were actually just slight variations of one kind, the same way that no 2 of us look exactly alike. And so they had to lump all 5 together into one, Homo erectus. But you remember, that's the garbage bin, correct? Oh. But think about it. In one day, they lost 5 additional supposed, proofs of evolution. Is that correct? Yes. Oh. Well, let's take a look at another one. Now, this one I have to explain. The first one was, from left to right. But this one actually goes up and down. And it's so big, I had to cut it in half and put it side by side, but I love it because it's just a great illustration of this. First of all, it starts at the top here. This is the present. This is today. And then it goes down again, but notice these four connect here. So I cut it in half, and these four are those four, okay? And then it goes down again to 6 million years ago. Now, again, you know everything you need to know to debunk this whole thing, but again, let's take a little look. We have solid bars with creatures. This, for instance, again, is Lucy right here, but we have solid bars, but notice that they are all connected with dotted lines. But did you happen to notice the question marks? Because let's take a look at how many question marks there are. Well, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We've got 10 question marks. Boy, doesn't that just strike confidence in you? Come on, folks. And again, please notice right here. Notice how these branch off. And this little one is that one. And so these four are these four right here. But notice there is no dotted line connecting them to humans. Is that correct? Correct. So why are these four there? Filler. Come on, say it loud, say it proud. Filler. But then, ladies and gentlemen, I wonder if you happen to notice there are no dotted lines connecting these three to any of these. That's right. Notice there's no dotted line connecting these three to any of this. They don't even know if they're connected. Hello? Come on, folks. Doesn't that just strike confidence in you? Well, just one more. I mentioned I grew up on the campus of Cal Berkeley as a child. And and remember, they reclassified all 5 of these as one thing, the garbage can. But this comes from my beloved University of California, Berkeley. Please notice, again, here, the present is on the right, getting older towards the left, going back 6 million years, right? Now, here we see solid bars, names. Again, that's Lucy afarensis there. And we have a decoration with skulls. Isn't that nice? But I wonder if you noticed that the evolutionists at Berkeley were so honest, they didn't even put in dotted lines. There are no dotted lines. Is that correct? And I wondered if you happen to notice, right here, at 6 million supposed years ago, well, did you notice it says right here, chimpanzees broke off of the human evolutionary line and went that-a-way? Hello? Come on, that's what it says right here. Chimpanzees broke off 6 million years ago from the human line and went that-a-way. Is that correct? Now, 2 things about this one. Number 1, June 13, 2011, Science Magazine, which is the second biggest evolutionary journal in the world, suddenly declared that actually chimpanzees had not broken away 6 million years ago. Actually, they broke away from the human line 13 million years ago. In one day, they moved the separation of chimpanzees and humans back by 7 million years in one day. Pretty good, huh? Oh. And of course, again, remember these were all reclassified as one back in 2013. Now, we're going to be summarizing some things here very quickly. So please hold on. I said if you would stay for the last 10 minutes, you would shake my hand and thank me for getting you out on a Tuesday night. And by the way, I'm very delighted to see how many people are here. I think we have a larger crowd than last night, that's excellent. Thank you very much. I'm sure it's a real vindication to Pastor. But in finishing, I'd like to show you this. That is the front cover of Time magazine the week of October 9, 2006. If you don't believe me, you can look it up on the internet. Now, I was walking down the hallway of an airport on my mission work, and as I'm walking by, I'm a trained scientist, a trained observer. I observe things at full speed that many people don't even see. And I'm walking by, and this magazine rack is there, and I just glanced, and I took 2 steps and came to a dead stop. And then I backed up. Because when I saw that cover, remember that Time magazine is the second biggest propagandizer of evolution behind National Geographic. Anything Time does is pure evolution. And so I saw this magazine cover, came to a dead stop, backed up, and took a good look at it. Notice it says here, how we became human. And here we see a human baby and a young chimpanzee. Is that correct? Correct. But the white print down here, I realize many of you cannot read. I'm going to copy it exactly for you so that you can see it. What it says right down below here in that white print, chimps and humans share almost 99% of their DNA. New discoveries reveal how we can be so alike and yet so different. And that's exactly what it says right there on the cover. Now, this is October of 2006. They said that chimps and humans share almost 99% of their DNA, correct? Now, Sunday I asked, how many of you have heard, not believed, but how many of you had heard that we supposedly share 96, 97, 98, 99% of the same DNA as chimpanzees? And many of you raised your hands, is that correct? Yes. Well, I saw that cover, and I got angry. I'm serious, I got really angry. But the Bible says you can be angry and sin not, is that correct? Because I got righteously angry, because I knew it was a bold-faced lie. So I went home and I did the research. Today I now have 66 slides of information proving scientifically it's not true. Don't worry, we're not going through all 66 tonight. But what I have, well, thank you, I appreciate that. But what I've done is I've boiled it all down to 4 pages to make it much more simple and easy to digest. And I'm sure you will appreciate that. You do appreciate that, right? I could get out the 66 if you... Well, what I want you to think about is this. We're looking at, do apes and people share 96 to 99% of the same DNA? And please notice I do give citations down here at the bottom. And notice that these citations come from Nature magazine, as some of them, from Nature. Now, Nature magazine, again, is the single highest scientific journal in the world for evolutionists. But let's take a look. To boil it down, remember that similarity may come from a common ancestor, which is what evolutionists teach, or it could come from a common designer, creator, God. Okay, so we could come from a common ancestor, that's evolution, or from a designer, creator, God. At this point, philosophically, we are in a balance scale of being even, but now we want to see which one's right, okay? So at this point, we start off even. Well, point number 2. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes, but gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, and orangutans have 24 pairs of chromosomes. They have an extra pair of chromosomes we don't even have. Please tell me, does that make them better than us? No. Good answer, but louder. Now, this one's a killer. Number 3, the Y chromosome. Now, the Y chromosome is what makes a boy a boy. Yeah, in English, it makes it really easy. It doesn't, you can't do that in other languages, but it does in English. But women have 2 X chromosomes for gender, and men have 1 X and 1 Y. And I did, ladies, try to help you out last night. Is that correct? I did try. I tried. Whether I was successful or not, you're going to have to determine later. But I have something for the men, too. I want to remind you guys, women have 2 X chromosomes for gender, and we have 1 X and 1 Y for gender. Now, guys, this is why women are a doubly unknown quantity to men. Come on, X is an unknown quantity, and they got 2. But I'm quoting from Nature magazine. The Y chromosomes of humans and apes are, quote, horrendously different from each other. Men, we vary by more than 58%. Humans have 60 genes for gender for men, but male chimps only have 25. Ladies, you are different, but you're similar by 69%, but you're still 31% different. Now, please tell me, ladies, if you were 31% different for the gender genes, men, you're more than 58% different in the gender genes, how can we only be 1% different? Well, let's continue. The chimpanzee genome is 11.5% larger than the human genome. They have 3.35 billion base pairs. We only have 3 billion. I had mentioned earlier, humans can vary by 4.5%. Now, think with me. They've got 11.5% more genetic information in their bodies than we do. Now, I love doing mission work in England or the United Kingdom. I love it because they actually speak English. Come on, we don't speak English. We speak American. I mentioned that the other night. But I love going to the UK and ministering over there because they really speak English. And the English has this marvelous, marvelous expression. They say, let's do the math. I love it. Let's do the math. What they're saying is, let's do the mathematics. Now, please tell me, if they have 11.5% more genetic information in their bodies than we do, how can we only be 1% different? Let's do the maths. Hello? Page 2. In 2005, evolutionists cherry-picked only 2.7% of the human DNA. Let me explain. The human DNA, well, we found out all of it in April of 2003, the completion of the Human Genome Project. But in 2005, we still did not know all of the ape DNA. And what they did was, since they believed that humans evolved from apes, they used where the genetic information is on our chromosomes, and then tried to arrange the ape material, comparing it to our chromosomes. So they used us as a skeleton, and then tried to take some bits and pieces of the ape DNA and put it in the same places. And what they did was they only took 2.7% of the human DNA with the ape DNA and compared it. That means they left out 97.3%. Now, please tell me, what rational human being would make a decision based on only 2.7% of the available information? Come on, folks, we all make decisions on less than 100% of information, of course. But what rational human being would leave out 97.3% of the information that was available? You see, this is why evolution is irrational, unreasonable, illogical, and unscientific. Hello? Well, let's continue. In the year 2000, the number by evolutionists had already been reduced to 95.2. Let me explain. The number 99 was never based on one piece of scientific information. In the year 1999, I think purely coincidence, but in the year 1999, evolutionists simply made up the number 99. But there was never any science to support 99, never. But in the year 2000, they already had it down to 95.2. It was never 99. And remember, the Human Genome Project was not completed again until April of 2003. But I want to point out all living creatures. I don't care whether you're a bacteria, a fish, a bird, a person, all life on Earth shares 25% the same DNA. There are just some things that are necessary for life. And when you try to compare things, you don't start at 0. You have to start at 25. Well, let's take it further. Remember that genetic similarity does not produce spiritual equivalency either. Could I get an amen? Amen. That's right. Page 3. I would like to introduce you to Dr. Jerry Bergman. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have 2 doctorates, 4 degrees. Dr. Bergman has 2 doctorates, but a total of 10 earned degrees. I don't know about you, but that kind of humbles me. But his specialty is biology and microbiology. The good news, he's one of us. That's good. Hello? He's a young earth believer. He's a Christian. But what he did was he took a look at the 2 largest catalogs of known mutations in plants, animals, and people that were anywhere in the world. Remember that mutations are what evolutionists claim produce evolution from one kind changing into another. You've heard the word mutation. However, this is the only thing that they believe that can happen by random chance that will cause one kind to change into another kind. But let me define the word mutation scientifically for you. It means copying error. A mutation is a copying error. Now think with me for a minute. When you copy things, you have only 2 choices. You can either copy them perfectly, in which case there is no change, or you can copy them how? Either perfectly or imperfectly. Is that correct? Mutations always lose, corrupt, destroy previously existing information. They are not a creative process. They destroy, corrupt, damage previously existing information. But evolutionists believe that it is the only natural random event that can cause an increase in complexity or intelligence by random chance. But it is simply not true. Mutations destroy, they do not create. And the laws of genetics are conservative, they are not creative. But Dr. Bergman went out and found almost 500,000 documented known mutations from fruit flies to people. and found that only 186 were not detrimental. They were not beneficial, but they were not detrimental. Did you hear me? So we used to call them, various things. Today they're called functional mutations. But the fact of the matter is he found only 186 that were not detrimental. Now that means that 99.96% of all mutations are harmful or lethal. But evolutionists believe that this is what causes us to get bigger, better, faster, smarter. When the truth is that science shows us that we're getting smaller, slower, and dumber. It's absolutely true. Because of the Human Genome Project completed in April of 2003, we now know that you and I are losing 1 to 2% of our genetic information per generation. I love my grandchildren, but they have 2 to 4% less genetic information than I do. Wow. Hello? Same thing is true of you. And it is absolutely true that your great-grandparents were individually smarter, more intelligent, and they had faster reaction times. We know this from science. But we're getting worse over time. This is a proof that the Lord is coming back soon. Yes. Hello? Now, chimpanzees and humans only share 29% of the same proteins. 71% of the proteins are different. Please tell me, if humans and chimpanzees only make 29% of the same proteins, how can we only be 1% different? Let's do the maths. And considering the whole genome in 2003, the estimate went down to apes and humans sharing only 86.7% DNA. Now, please notice that's 2003. Please tell me how Time magazine in October of 2006 could say 99, when this number, please notice, comes from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, USA. It doesn't get higher than that here. They said it was already down to 86.73 years earlier. Could it be that Time magazine didn't care? Could it be that Time magazine didn't do the research? Could it be that they had an agenda?
That's right.
Could it be that they simply printed what they wanted to be true, and it wasn't? Well, only one last page. Again, if you'll stay with us, you'll enjoy this, I assure you. I want you to know that considering the whole genomes of the ape and humans, then known in September of 2005, the number went down to 80.6. Did you notice the more we know, the more different we know we are? Is that correct? But I want to bring you up to date. Now, this number is not going to change. As of the end of 2013, the number of comparison is now down to 70%. You are only 70% the same as a chimpanzee or an ape. Are you with me? And that number is not going to change because we know in and out the genome of both. This number is absolutely stable. But before we leave tonight, I said that you would shake my hand, thank me on the way out, if you would just stay for the last 10 minutes. I want you to know that based upon this absurd method of comparison, that you are also 50% the same as a banana. I don't know about you, I find that appealing. And now the last time I looked, a banana is a plant. But you are 50% the same as a banana genetically. But you are also 35% the same as a daffodil, or a narcissus if you prefer, it's the same plant. But you're 35% the same as a narcissus or a daffodil. But of course, at least that's biblical because you're supposed to flower where you're planted, correct? Hello? So let's think. You are 70% the same as an ape, but you are 50% the same as a banana and 35% the same as a flower. Is that correct? But I'm not finished. According to this absurd method of comparison, I want you to know tonight that you are also 88% the same as a rat. Oh, come on, folks. At least it's a mammal. Hello? But you are 88% the same genetically as a rat. But I am not finished. I also want you to know tonight, before you leave here, that you are 60% the same as a chicken. Now, let's think about this. When you have breakfast with a banana or fried chicken, is it cannibalism? No. You know, the chicken is often referred to as the gospel bird, you know that. But you know what a belt is around a minister? It's a fence around a chicken graveyard. Y'all have to lighten up. Now, well, I'm not finished yet because I also want you to know tonight that you are 70% the same as a sea sponge. So maybe, just maybe, there is a certain truth. Well, I'm not finished. One more. I want you to know tonight before you leave here that you are 88% the same as a sea squirt. What's the matter? You don't know what a sea squirt is? You don't? Well, let me explain what a sea squirt is. First of all, let me show you the picture of a sea squirt. That's the picture of a sea squirt, and genetically you are 88% the same as a sea squirt. Now, I want all of the young ones here to listen to me. So you want to listen very carefully, and you want to listen very carefully, because you're going to love this. Okay? Seriously, you're going to want to remember this the rest of your life. Now, what is a sea squirt? Well, technically, it's an animal. And as a young sea squirt, it swims through the ocean, okay? But when it becomes an adult, it attaches to the sea floor. It converts into a filter feeder like corals and sponges. And as an adult, the brain dissolves away. As an adult, it doesn't have a brain. I leave you to your own devices. But my question is this. Please tell me, you're only 70% the same as a chimpanzee, 70% the same as a sea sponge, but you're 88% the same as a rat, and 88% the same as a sea squirt. So please tell me, which one do you think you're closer to? And I'll let you think about it. Pastor, thank you very much.